auspicious start to this evening. Thank you, sirs and ma'am. Every institution is guided to greater heights by those at its helm. At GLC, we owe that gratitude to our principal, Professor Dr. Asmita Vaidya, for the same. Though she could not be here due to prior commitments, her thoughts are with us, and we hope that it becomes a successful event here. So, a very good evening to everyone present here. We are absolutely delighted to welcome all of you to the Knockout 2024. More than a decade ago, Knockout began with a singular aim of bringing together a spectrum of different perspectives on a topic of contemporary importance. Departing from the tradition of standard debate or panel has been a conscious decision from its very inception. In this 13th edition, Knockout still celebrates the spirit of dissent, deliberation, and discourse. Though the tradition indicates a single moderator overseeing the debate, the tradition this time, the debate shall be moderated by a division bench of Mr. Sanjay Singhvi, Senior Advocate, and Ms. Jane Cox, Counsel, Bombay High Court.
Mr. Sanjay Singhvi, a seasoned legal practitioner and a designated senior advocate, has been practicing law for over 4 decades. Graduating from our beloved Government Law College in 1982, he has consistently represented labor interests at various legal forums. As a senior advocate, he has argued cases both in the High Courts and the Supreme Court of India, demonstrating his expertise and commitment to advancing the cause of labor justice and for the rights of the unions and the workers. I invite our Professor in charge, Mr. Duffel, to felicitate sir.
Should we go? Yes, please. Come.
Ms. Jane Cox, a distinguished legal practitioner, has been practicing law over the course of the last 3 decades. Graduating from Wadham College, Oxford, and registered with the Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa, she has consistently represented trade unions and workers before the Honorable Bombay High Court and industrial courts. Ms. Cox's deep understanding of labor law and her unwavering dedication to justice has earned her a reputation as a respected and an effective legal counsel. I request our Professor in charge, Mr. Duffel, to felicitate ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Rishik there to felicitate Professor Duffel, our professor in charge, for all the efforts that is put for the community. Coming on to the debaters, this year's speaker lineup has been curated with the intention of bringing together a diverse and detailed array of perspectives to broaden the debate. The debate shall proceed as follows. Initially, we shall take a preliminary vote of the audience to gauge which side is winning. Secondly, all speakers will make their opening speeches. The moderators will pose questions to the speakers and express their own views. Once the opening speeches have concluded and the moderators have posed the questions, the floor will be open to the audience to ask questions to whoever side they would like to ask. A final vote of the House will then be taken at the end. You may notice that two chits have been provided to you, one representing either side of the speakers. Both represent, one of them represents, the blue side represents the proposition and the red side represents the opposition. So whichever side you would like to vote for, we request you to raise the chit up high as and when required.
Our first speaker for side proposition is Ms. Isha Prakash. Isha. Isha is a research fellow at Vidhi Center for Legal Research and co-founder of the Purple Ribbon Collective. She also served as the chief editor for the 90th edition of our beloved Melange. We are excited to have Isha defend side proposition for knockout. Our second speaker for side proposition is Ms. Yashasvi. Yashasvi is currently an associate at Khaitan and Company, specializing in intellectual property rights. She has an extensive written record, and she also served as the deputy convener of the Debating and Literary Society in 2021-22. We are thrilled to have her with us. Further, coming to the opposition, our first speaker for the side opposition is Ms. Drasti Jain. Drasti is currently working as an associate at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, specializing in banking and finance. She has an extensive debating and mooting record and has been a prolific manner, chairing over 30 conferences. We are excited to have her with us for knockout. Our second speaker for the side opposition is Mr. Rajdeep Mukherjee. Rajdeep is currently an associate at Trilegal. He has an extensive mooting record and a debating history, and has also judged the final rounds of the University of New South Wales debate in 2020. We are very glad to have him with us today.
So before we move forward with the debate, we'd like to take a preliminary vote to gauge which side has the power. So all those in favor of proposition may raise their blue chit. So the proposition dictates that the welfare schemes and all that are introduced, the proposition argues on those points and the benefits of the same. So if I may have a show of hands. Okay, and all those in favor of opposition, that says that these schemes may not necessarily show or rather push forward the meaning that they intend to put. Okay, thank you everyone. That does indicate a trend. So before I now request sir to provide a brief introduction of the topic from his perspective.
Thank you for the organizers, and thank you also for all the debaters. I wish them luck. The point is that what is society finally? Society is nothing but people coming together for their welfare. If there was no welfare, there would be no society. If we have a society where you say it's each one for himself and the devil takes the hindmost, then that's not society at all. It was that way for a certain period. For a certain period after that, people had to come together. If nothing else, the coming together for defense itself was one form of welfare. And after many stages, don't want to have a long lecture on this, but the fact is that finally we reached a question of democracy. But democracy has not always had the same meaning. The word democracy comes from Greece. And in Greece it really there was a fantastic democracy. If you read Plato's Republic, the word republic, all of you know of res judicata. Now, republic comes from res publica, that is of the public, like it is that which is judicated, that which is of the public. So, republics were formed, the Greeks, Roman republics, and they had a fantastic democracy in the sense that whenever assembly was sitting, any free man could go sit there, whatever was the question, he could vote on. It was not only elected representatives, anybody could go. That was how wide the democracy was. But I said any free man. And they did not think that having slaves was against democracy. Having slaves was considered a part of democracy. That slaves are there as chattel. So the idea of democracy evolved. Today's idea of democracy, I would say, comes from the idea of a lot of our fundamental rights, actually, besides fundamental rights are some of the main things of our constitution, I would say. The main thing is the preamble. The second most important thing is the fundamental rights. Otherwise, the rest of it comes largely from the Government of India Act 1935, what will be the lists, etc. But the fundamental rights also borrows greatly from the United Nations Human Rights Charter. The United Nations Human Rights Charter was the first after the Second World War, which said that not only are all people equal, all nations are equal. So, starting from that concept, we came to the right of fundamental rights to protect the individual against the state. Now, democracy today means basically nothing more than one person, one vote. Today we are hearing about ONOP, that is one nation, one poll. There has always been the question of what will be the way in which citizens can control government besides just a vote once in 5 years. You can vote once in 5 years. But what control do you have over the government after that? That question has always, in 1872 was the first time when workers took over the state machinery in the Paris Commune, and for the first time they introduced the right to recall. That is, if your representative doesn't do what you like, you can recall them. All of you know that Annabhau Sathe's big agitation a few years back was for that, right to recall. We have no right to recall. If there is, right now, because polls are at different times, it acts as a type of recall. If you find that a certain government is not acting properly in the elections in some other state, they will be pulled down. But if you have one nation, one poll, then there will be no control of the people for 5 years whatsoever. Anyways, it will also maybe allow the governments to have more schemes. So, today the question is not just that. Today democracy has to go beyond one vote for one person. Otherwise, we know that Ambani's, Adani's, Tata's all have one vote. And the person on the street also has one vote. But the influence is different. There's no doubt about it. Our constitution calls for economic equality. What is economic equality? We will have to debate on that. So, welfare has to be, in a sense, in society altogether, but to what extent is the question? I personally feel that the Balaji judgment, which said that you can give TVs just before the elections, and that will not count as an unfair, corrupt practice under Section 123 of the Representation of People Act, may have been going too far. but of course that question has now come up again in the slightly different form, whether irrational schemes can be given, or irrational welfare. Now, who will define irrational is going to be another question which the Supreme Court will have to answer, and which probably our debaters are going to talk about. So, no doubt, finally, today the state, if you read Article 38, 39(2) especially, that the state shall redistribute the assets in a manner as to create more equality. That is written in our constitution. How do they redistribute assets? There are only two ways. Or rather one way, which has two parts. One is you tax the rich and you give to the poor. That's the only way you can redistribute assets. I can't think of any other way in which the state can redistribute assets. But I read here, for instance, it says that people who are against freebies, it says in public opinion, that 3.5 crore citizens or 2.89% population are against because they pay taxes. That's not true. Taxes are paid by everybody. We must realize that over 50% of the revenue of the state is indirect taxes. GST. Everybody pays it. There's a recent, very recent study, hardly 2 weeks ago from Oxfam, which shows, of course, they have only considered food and certain non-food items. They don't consider taxes on real estate, etc., because that is paid mainly by the rich. But if you go by food and the common non-food items, then the bottom 50% of the population, which has only 3% of the wealth, the top 1% has 40% of the wealth. That's the Oxfam study. But the bottom 50% pays 66% of the taxes, of indirect taxes, though they have only 3% of the wealth. So the collection is coming from the people. People are paying taxes. How they should then be redirected into a welfare? Of course, that is the question. That will be the debate. I hope it will be an enjoyable debate. I think that this is a very important question. It's being debated right now in the Supreme Court. Prashant Bhushan has argued that irrational freebies should be stopped. Again, what is irrational will be the question. And I hope that we will be able to throw some light upon it with this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful remarks. So without further ado, let's begin with Knockout 2024. Please help me welcome our first speaker for the evening, Ms. Isha Prakash. Yashasvi would be going first.
Hello. Hello. Okay. To begin with, I would say that two paths go down and converge to state that welfare in India is a right of the people, and the government has a duty to ensure to provide what the people cannot provide for themselves. The first part being India's identity as a democratic socialist state, and this is provided in the preamble of our constitution. It is affirmed by the DPSPs, and from the get-go itself, from the very first 5-year plan, it was laid down that the central objective of the state and its working should be the realization of raising the standard of living of the people. The second path is the inevitable need of the hour. While the country suffers from multiple crises like hunger, unemployment, health calamities, inflation, most Indians are unable to afford basic necessities to survive. Just like so, I would like to highlight some shameful figures from the latest Oxfam report. The first being that the number of hungry Indians has increased from 190 million to 350 million. And following the pandemic, the bottom 50% of the population have become even poorer, which means that they have exceptionally poor diet, they are in great debt, and as a result are dying. Most importantly, essential items and services have become largely inaccessible for the most part of the population of our country. In this context, it is important to realize that welfare is something that is non-negotiable for the country to provide for its citizens. And now we come to how the state can provide said welfare. In the current socio-economic context, it is imperative that the state reaffirms the value of welfare programs and finds a way to expand them in a way that is able to meet the needs of citizens on the ground level. So providing basic necessities like food, like water, like employment is already the most fundamental responsibility of the state. But what are they doing beyond that to meet citizens at what their need is at the current hour rather than what their right is? We come to freebies in this discussion, right? Which on this side of the house we believe that is a subset of welfare. And before I even delve deeper into freebies, I would like to say that freebies are in fact welfare, and it is important to know that in most discussions, the definition of freebies is described by groups as per the views that they hold of them. So when the RBI is defining freebies, it is looking at it fiscally. It is not looking at it in a way that has impact on citizens' lives. Most attempts, rather, to define freebies are rooted in the assumption that they may be welfare, but they are welfare measures which are wasteful or which are manipulative. So when the RBI says that freebies may be non-merit goods, does that mean that freebies do not serve public purpose? Throughout our discussion today on this side, we will prove to you how freebies actually do serve public purpose. And this definition that has been provided by the RBI rests on a very flawed assumption that these measures do not add to the welfare of the people at all, which is categorically untrue, as has also been held in the Balaji judgment, where the court has said that even goods like televisions, goods like laptops and gadgets can add to the standard of living of the people. At this juncture, I would also like to clarify that promises can be made of two types. The short-term ones, which are announced just before elections, and promises which are made in manifestos of political parties. Freebies in this context, in today's debate, only includes what is stated in the manifesto of a political party as part of its public policy, and so has been held in the Balaji judgment to say that any party stating what its public policy views are going to be like is fair. The promise being given right before an election is something that is categorically described as prohibited under section 123 of the Representation of the People Act. So the crux of our case today is that the line between freebies and social welfare schemes at large is blurred. One may argue to the degree of the impact of a freebie, but just the fact that it does have an impact, that it does take somebody somewhere, makes freebies an essential part of the overall welfare aid which is provided by the state. It makes it a merit good, which some experts disagree and say that freebies are not merit goods. Historically, it is important to note that successful schemes like the midday meals and Manrega were deemed to be freebies until the impact actually actualized and they started showing results of how when kids were given free meals, the attendance of students in school actually increased, or even like during the pandemic, the Manrega was able to provide employment to a lot of people in the country. And at this point, this connotation that we attach to freebies, this negative connotation was othered. And at this point, people said, now the Manrega and midday meals are not freebies, they are welfare meals. I believe that social welfare schemes such as this cannot be labeled just as freebies, as this expenditure is part of the government's basic responsibility. The citizens are in a state in our country right now where they do not have access to what is owed to them. We don't have access to proper education, healthcare. At this juncture, it is imperative that the state realizes that it has to meet the people meet the people at what they need. A very small example I would like to point out is laptops being given out as part of freebies.
You can continue in the open.
Okay. I think if I could just take a minute to conclude what I want to say. Yeah, just a minute. Thank you. I think the crux of today's side of our argument today is that freebies carry this negative connotation with them, and they are pejoratively spoken about because they are attached to the marginalized sections of our society. So when tax rebates are given, when corporate loans are refused, those are not termed as freebies, they are termed as incentives. Just to give you a figure, when farmer loans are waived off, it is called a freebie. But when 10.6 lakh crore in 5 years, 50% of which is linked to large corporates, is waived off, it is called an incentive. I believe that in order to fully realize the impact of freebies in the larger scheme of welfare, we need to detach this connotation that we have attached to freebies, which comes from the idea that they are being given to citizens who are, they are being given to citizens who are not deserving. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yashasvi. I now invite Mr. Rajdeep Mukherjee to advocate for the side of opposition.
A very good evening. Before delving into the arguments, let us take a short history lesson. Freebies as a concept is not something that has been in vogue only recently. In fact, the inception of freebies stretches back over 2000 years, when the Roman Empire came into power and found itself facing a societal crisis. Overcrowded cities, widespread poverty, and poor sanitation had left the population on the brink of starvation. In order to combat this unrest and riots, the ruling autocracy devised a superficial yet shrewd solution. The empire implemented two primary strategies. Firstly, it made food items such as grain and meat available free of charge. Second, it orchestrated grand public events such as chariot races and brutal animal combats to provide free entertainment. During this time, the Roman poet Juvenal, in his famous satire called the X, coined the term bread and circuses to describe this manipulation of public approval. Just as the Roman rulers provided free grains and entertainment to maintain control over the populace, many political parties in India today are using free handouts to win votes rather than addressing the root causes of these systemic issues. It is important for us to lay down certain lines on what our stance is in today's debate. We also think and agree with side proposition that providing welfare and support to citizens is one of the most primary responsibilities of a nation like India. We also agree with them that the fact that freebies can be extremely similar to welfare schemes when looked at superficially. In fact, there may even be a freebie scheme that might seem to work effectively at that moment. Where does today's debate lie then? We, on side opposition, are gravely concerned with the growing popularity and unabashed promotion of freebie schemes under the garb of taking genuine, long-term and institutionalized efforts in achieving social welfare. In the last few decades, the promise of providing freebies has helped swing electoral outcomes in favor of multiple political parties. It is very evident that the distribution of freebies has been subsumed under patronage politics. These freebies that we're talking about are targeted schemes which are used to mobilize specific constituencies such as women, farmers, or the youth. And these act as a replacement to the long-term and productive asset-building policy initiatives which political parties now use to provide tangible private material goods that are directly and immediately touching the lives of voters and thus accruing immediate political benefits. A question then arises: how do we as voters distinguish between freebies and welfare schemes? This requires careful consideration of the context in terms of multiple factors such as time, necessity, frequency, sustainability, and most importantly, economic efficiency. Freebies and welfare mechanisms are fundamentally different when examined from both macro and micro perspectives. The directive principles of state policy, which is something which is highlighted minutes before, outline the goals for the socio-economic conditions that enable citizens to enjoy a decent standard of life. Although freebies try to make a feeble attempt at reaching this goal, it falls short when it comes to long-term impact. Whether it is distribution of non-essential items such as laptops, gold, washing machines, or providing one-time benefits such as loan waivers or cash handouts, once the scheme ends, so does its benefit. The people who had been dependent on such handouts are now left stranded without any sustainable source of income. Instead of creating a lasting change, freebies merely offer temporary pacification, leaving citizens in an even more vulnerable position than they were in before. As Yashasvi mentioned earlier, the concept of standard of living of citizens is bound to change from time to time, and distribution of non-essential items, if given to eligible people, could be considered to fall under directive principles of state policy. We still think it's a problem. Why is that? We agree that the state has the authority and competency to decide what is essential and what is not. But given that these promises are not made by a governing body, but a political party aiming to come into power, they are more likely to propose solutions that offer quick fixes rather than addressing the root cause of issues. For example, we have seen political parties promising unemployment benefits instead of focusing on long-term job creation. These promises often stem from populist and majoritarian demands designed to provide momentary benefits and short-term satisfaction. Today, the combined expenditure of states and the center on social welfare schemes has seen an increase of almost 10% annually. Although this might seem like the government is taking more efforts into addressing these systemic issues, but the alarming increase in rate of poverty, unemployment, and growing lack of medical and educational facilities proves otherwise. There are states like Gujarat, Punjab, and Chhattisgarh who are spending more than 10% of their total revenue expenditure solely on subsidies, where the RBI itself has felt the need to warn governments on the rising expenditure on such schemes. If you were to closely pay attention to the trend of freebies, particularly by state governments, you would notice how if a certain scheme given by one state is successful, it is immediately emulated by another solely because it proves to be momentarily successful. Let's look at the last election manifesto for Punjab, where the Aam Aadmi Party promised 300 units of free power to every household each month. This scheme was implemented after seeing its success in Delhi, despite it costing the taxpayers in Delhi around rupees 3,200 crores per month. But the change here is, Delhi being a union territory has much of its expenses like the police and defense covered by the central government. Punjab on the other hand has to bear the full burden of its public expenditure. This scheme increased the cost to over 16% of the state's total revenue. As a result, the Punjab government had to seek a loan from the centre to manage its expenses and is now counted among the top 5 financially vulnerable states grappling with high levels of debt. So, where do we stand over here? It is extremely pertinent to understand that freebie schemes cannot exist at par with welfare schemes because they neither serve as a replacement nor the the mutual exclusivity of these two schemes is because there is this mutual exclusivity because both of these schemes, either a welfare scheme or a freebie scheme, will draw from the same coffers of the government. Given that you promote one against the other, welfare schemes will always suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajdeep. Now I request Isha, the speaker number 2 for the proposition, to go ahead.
Hello. Hi everyone. Firstly, I would like to say that I would like to reiterate that what my co-speaker already said, which is that we do not distinguish between welfare measures and freebies on this side of the house, and we will be categorically refuting every single point made by the opposition in the rebuttal round. Now, coming back to my speech, in a country as vast and diverse as India, with its complex social fabric, over 1.4 billion people navigate their own unique complexities in life. But one thing that unites us all is our constitutional rights of equality, justice, and dignity. Whether it's a farmer in rural Bihar, a teacher in Kerala, or a worker in the bustling streets of Mumbai, every citizen of this nation deserves the right to live with dignity, security, and hope for a better tomorrow. But this promise does not come naturally. It is built through deliberate action, through policies that lift the most vulnerable and ensure that no one is left behind. Welfare measures in India or elsewhere are not mere acts of charity. They are not freebies, they are not handouts, they are not favors or party favors, if I may. It represents the duty of the state and it is the right of the citizens, as enshrined in our constitution and the very ethos of our democracy. Historically speaking, during the Great Depression in the United States, and I say United States because it's usually upheld as the gold standard of capitalism, the absence of safety nets left over 15 million Americans unemployed and entire families in destitution. It was not until the New Deal was introduced and Social Security, among other measures, was introduced that the nation began to stabilize, lifting millions out of poverty and halving the unemployment rate by 1940. These were not handouts. They are lifelines that saved the US economy from complete collapse. Similarly, coming back to India, India's own history underscores the critical need for welfare measures. Apart from decades of colonization and oppression, the Bengal famine of 1943, for example, resulted in the deaths of millions due to starvation. This serves as a stark reminder that a lack of protective measures and social safety nets can lead to unimaginable suffering, especially during times like COVID-19 pandemic that recently happened. Welfare measures are not a temporary solution to poverty or inequality. They are a long-term investment in the nation's future and its citizenry. Government aid reflects the commitment of the government to its people, and rightly so. In return, citizens must recognize their right to demand and protect these essential services. We have all heard the proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Now let's discuss this in a practical sense. Rahul is a fisherman who went fishing daily with his fishing boat, fishing rod, bait and all other equipment. One day he met a poor old man called Arjun, and Arjun told Rahul that he and his family were hungry and he asked if he can give him a fish or at least share it with him. But Rahul remembered this proverb and simply refused to give Arjun a fish. Instead, he told him that, I can teach you how to fish so you can feed yourself and your family for a lifetime. Which he did. He taught him how to use baits to catch certain fish, some techniques. He taught him how to sail a boat. He told him where the best and the biggest fish were found. And Arjun was a fast learner, so he learnt it well as well. Now, Rahul, glad that he could help, left with his boat along with his fishing poles and other equipment. So I ask you, was Arjun fed for a lifetime? Of course not, right? When we claim to be teaching a person to fish, it's all well and good. But we cannot ignore the reason why they need to be taught to fish in the first place. An unequal distribution, not only of fish,
but also of access to fishing equipment, ponds, bait, education or training, etc. The truth is that we all need the right tools to succeed. And unless the state is willing to help vulnerable individuals access the right resources, we cannot expect them to cast their own lines to opportunity. For real life examples, in 2006, the government of Bihar provided girls who enrolled in secondary school with a free bicycle. Of course, this was called a freebie. This resulted in increased girls' age-appropriate enrollment in secondary school by 32% and reduced the corresponding age gender gap by 40%. Mobility and safety are indispensable to girls and women everywhere, as most of us in this room know, and especially so in rural and remote parts of India. This initiative was so successful that it was successfully replicated in other Indian states and also 7 African countries, and was also endorsed by the United Nations. Similarly, the provision of LPG cylinders that could save over 150,000 lives every single year. How? Today, one of the biggest causes of infant mortality is actually household pollution, believe it or not. Switching to LPG drastically reduces average household exposure to pollutants. This reduction also extends beyond the household because of traditional cooking methods such as using cow dung, fuel, wood, etc. contribute to air pollution at large. Now, a study estimated that there could be at least a 28% decrease in pollution levels in some states, with Maharashtra, Odisha and Uttarakhand then successfully achieving national clean standards of 40 micrograms per cubic meter of air. Coming to the popular midday meal scheme, in the early 1900s, like my co-speaker already said, the midday meals were provided to school children and was criticized as a freebie measure, and it was even stopped by the British government for a bit because of how successful it was. And then it was revived, and today, after the Supreme Court's directions, it has been implemented in states across the country and has immense benefits. And this does not include just enrollment and attendance of school children, but it also has cross-generational impacts with lower stunting among children today whose mothers in their schools had free lunches purely because of how much extra nutrition they afforded or they were given. All of this is a firm reminder that the state exists not just to govern, but to care for. And what is a state that cares? A state that cares is a state that protects. A state that cares is a state that provides. They must guarantee access to education, healthcare, and a life of dignity, and it is the citizen's right to demand it. And unfortunately, this is not as easy as just building a school or a hospital. We all here know that the functionality of these institutions and naturally the means to these ends are much more complicated than that. The complexity of poverty is inconceivably convoluted, and it is in consequence the solution to this centuries-old issue is not going to be a straightforward route to navigate. Thank you. Pertinently, for those, give me one more minute, fortunately. Pertinently, for those wondering about returns, welfare schemes can also act as a great economic stimulus. When low-income families receive government aid, they have a slightly higher disposable income, which they can then spend on essential goods and services. This increased consumption can lead to business growth, job creation, and ultimately higher tax revenues for the state. So in this manner, it allows economically disadvantaged individuals to also contribute and participate better in the economy. In conclusion, welfare measures are more than just programs. They are the backbone and the heartbeat of an inclusive society, a society where development is not just for a privileged few, but a promise to all. They ensure that every citizen, regardless of their background, has access to basic rights and opportunities. So the question today before us, my friends, is not whether we can afford welfare measures. It is the real question is whether we can afford to ignore them. As we stand at the crossroads of a rapidly changing world, let us remember that a nation's greatness is not measured by its GDP or the wealth of a select few, but it is, in fact, the well-being of all of its citizens.
Thank you.
I'm sure the Bombay High Court judges would love to stop us after 7 minutes. I like we're stopping all the things.
Thank you, Isha. Now I request speaker number 2 for the opposition, Drasti. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for choosing to spend your Saturday afternoon hearing us discuss this riveting topic. I, for one firmly believe that freebies, or the rewdi culture as our Prime Minister calls it, is detrimental to a socialist welfare nation such as ours. Freebies are an effective way of distracting the public from the inability of the government and the political parties to promise and deliver on long-term welfare measures. But here's the kicker. Just because your eyes are blindfolded by the temporary relief of freebies, that does not mean that the problem is gone. When governments are unable or unwilling to address systematic issues such as the debt crisis faced by small farmers, they resort to temporary debt waivers. While this may relieve immediate distress, it does nothing to break the cycle of indebtedness that continues to trap farmers. The real issues, such as lack of access to credit, poor agricultural infrastructure, and inadequate market support, are left untouched. It also leads to a culture of defaulting on loans because you know that the government can, and more importantly, will swoop in and save you. Why then would any financial institution be incentivized to provide you with loans? To resolve this issue is why the RBI has, among other long-term measures by the government, introduced digital lending to ensure that people who lack access to credit facilities, the one without any credit score, get access to better interest rates, tenure, and such other provisions of loan terms. Let's take this one notch further and allow me a moment to paint a better picture of what it looks like in reality, especially in a country like India. So you have people getting free ration, electricity, transportation, television sets, microwave, laptops, and whatnot. But at the same time, they're still flanked by poor living conditions. Our country continues to be home to one of the world's largest slums. Our citizens do not have access to proper sanitation facilities or education that empowers them. The annual status of education report released their report in January of this year, which among other findings states that most rural kids between the ages of 14 to 18 are unable to do class 3 maths and that over 25% cannot read. So the free education that is being provided to the children of this nation does not actually educate or empower them. Now you might be tempted to ask me, but Drasti, why should the state work towards long-term measures to empower the citizens when it is very much capable of bettering their current situation by providing freebies? To which I have a very simple answer. The state does not have infinite resources or budget. There is no cornucopia in possession of the government. The state cannot be feeding the citizens or providing them for all their needs for free forever. In simple words, citizens should not become liability for any country but be active contributors to the economy and add to the GDP of that nation. Now for this to happen in a developing economy like ours especially, it is necessary that the government expenditure should be directed towards empowering people by investing in long-term measures that builds an ecosystem which enables the citizens to become self-reliant. Whereas in this world of freebies, the people who become dependent on such handouts are left stranded without any sustainable source of income or support. Instead of creating lasting change, freebies merely offer temporary pacification, leaving citizens in the same vulnerable position that they were in before. This brings me to a pertinent question. What exactly are these freebies coming at a cost of? My dear audience, they're coming at the cost of a better world for both you and me. And if you look at how offering freebies has played out in reality, it becomes very difficult for the government which offers freebies or any forthcoming governments to withdraw these freebies. Because of a number of reasons, like dependency of people on freebies, fear of losing popular support and votes, and more importantly, not having an existing infrastructure in place which can ease out the burden people face in the absence of these freebies. Simply because you treated the symptom of the problem by spending on freebies and did not invest in long-term problem solving of building a support system. I'll even give you an example. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, under which free food grains were distributed to 80 crore people, was started at the time of the COVID pandemic to support people in crisis. But this scheme could not be stopped till date. And the government has kept extending it till this election and even promised to extend it further till 2025. Drasti spoke about states emulating schemes and freebies given in one state simply because it works. I want to introduce you to another angle of this problem, which is freebies when offered in one state lead to popular demand for such freebies in other states too. Of course, since the government would want to be re-elected, and they know that if not them, any other political party will very happily offer these freebies to the people, they will give into this demand, irrespective of the economic situation and more importantly, the need of the state. This in turn imposes a lot of pressure on the exchequer, and money from various other schemes has to be redirected to fulfill the freebies demanded by people. For example, the Telangana government has launched a crop loan waiver scheme for 2024, which includes waiving up to rupees 2 lakhs in loans for farmers. This would cost the state 31,000 crores. The Farmers Union in Punjab has also demanded the government to waive off their debt. This comes at the heels of the Telangana government itself agreeing that such waiving of the debt is merely a temporary relief, and long-term solution can only be through adequate investment in agriculture by providing training and education to farmers, developing infrastructure for farming and irrigation, introducing modern techniques and channels for exporting agriculture goods. Then there's the issue of cancelling of existing schemes by one party upon coming to power, undermining the continuity and effectiveness of welfare measures. This constant political overturning of schemes fails to serve the intended beneficiaries and reveals that many of these programs are launched with political motivations rather than a genuine interest to uplift the underprivileged. When policies are created merely to secure electoral gains, their sustainability and long-term impact are compromised, leaving the public in a cycle of uncertainty. The saying that there are no free lunches rings especially true when we consider the hidden cost of freebies. True welfare doesn't come from temporary handouts, but from creating lasting opportunities that empower individuals to stand on their own. Instead of offering free electricity or consumer goods, governments should focus on investing in human capital through education, skill development, and meaningful employment. These efforts do not offer short-term relief. They set people on a path to upward mobility, breaking the cycle of dependency and poverty. Thus, every so-called freebie has a price, and that price is often a weaker, more dependent society. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Drasti. Now I would like to open the floor for questions by the moderators.
Yeah, we decided among ourselves that I would put my questions to this team, Jane will put hers to this. Actually, I don't see a debate at a certain level because both agree on one thing. Yashasvi started by saying that we are talking of freebies as those which are in the manifesto and not given just as a sop, if I understood. And Rajdeep also agreed that yes, welfare measures must be there, but not in the nature of those which are soft. So there seems to be some agreement here. We must make scope for debate. So we will put the question so we can make it a debate. Otherwise, both agree that yes, welfare of a certain nature is justified. We must remember that welfare was talked about firstly as Isha properly put it, at FDR's time for the New Deal, when America went into recession. After that you had the Keynesian economics, and it's Keynesian economics that has, well, there were Gill and Marshall before that, but that's basically considered as the base of the welfare state. And like he said, but then that is a question which Rajdeep has to answer, because he said that unemployment allowances being given would be a SOP. Now, if unemployment allowance being given would be a SOP, that is absolutely against Keynes. Keynes said specifically, pay people to dig holes and to fill them again. Because you wanted to put money back into the economy, as was rightly said here from this side. So, things like farmers being given reduction in their tax or in their loans. Because actually if you read Swaminathan's report, the Swaminathan Committee's report clearly says that the amount that farmers are paid for their produce is vastly less even than what their input is nowadays. And the Swaminathan Committee has recommended that you should have a minimum support price of at least 50% over the input. That is the Swaminathan Committee report. So that is necessary for the farmers to remain in India, otherwise they can't exist, the amount that they spend. So would that be considered a freebie? I mean, it was because he said giving these benefits to farmers or to women. I know I'm very suspect about the Ladki Bahin Yojana that is going on right now. But nevertheless, Ladki Bahin Yojana has two limits to it. One is age limits, that is from 16 to 65, and the other is wage limit of 2.5 lakh family income per year. Now one may argue that that is too much or too little. That is a different question. But if it was a properly thought out for women, giving a certain benefit to women, would that be considered a SOP or would that be considered a welfare measure? Because women are an oppressed section of society, in our society as it stands. So that is the questions that I would put. Same way that states do not have infinite resources and that states copy each other. But states can redirect. I would just once again like to read Article 39 of our Constitution just for a moment. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just subsection 2 of that. 2 and 3. B says, the state shall in particular direct its policy towards securing that the ownership and control of the material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. And C, that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. Today there is a concentration of wealth, you cannot deny it, and it's growing higher. The top 1% is getting much richer and the poor are getting poorer. How do you redistribute? How do you bring 39.3 then? How will you redistribute this except with welfare measures? That is a question that I would put to your team. 1 minute.
Thank you, sir, for the question. I'm going to answer this question by requesting you to look at this scenario slightly broader and from two perspectives. Let's take the unemployment example as a SOP, where right now we've seen the Karnataka government give unemployment benefits to both graduates and diploma holders amounting to about 3,000 rupees a month. Now let's look at this program from the optics of first the government and then the citizen/voter who's unemployed right now. As an unemployed voter, I would probably just have my priorities on getting those 3,000 rupees that month and month thereafter and continuing that cycle. And that's where my vote will lie. But as you mentioned of Article 39.2, there is a responsibility of state, which is a larger responsibility. Over here, I think the state needs to look beyond the X number of months that the unemployed person is thinking that, hey, my sustenance will continue. What does this look like? This looks like the state putting out planned out 5-year plans or strategically implemented issues where they try to solve either through skill building mechanisms or through job creation programs. That's something probably which a voter will not understand. He will much likely be more satisfied with getting the 3,000 rupees right then and there. And that's the problem. As a state, we feel it's the responsibility of this state to give the tougher solutions, but they should be the better solutions. And that's something which voters need to realize.
Okay, anyways, we'll go on this later. But otherwise, what it seems to me is that you are saying this type of SOP is better than that type of SOP.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, because all of them are coming through the same contingency fund, one has to be prioritized over the other.
That we can always debate. Anyways.
I'd like to put a question to the proposers. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you. I think you both did it extremely well. Your also diction and presentation was excellent. And I particularly like the fact that I think you hit the ball on the head when you summarize the issue of level playing field. But ultimately, if there's no level playing field, then you do require some level of intervention, because I thought that was really the crux of the issue. I want to bring it back just a little bit to law. Now, the Subramanian judgment is a little ticklish because the courts also, of course, I don't give the answer to my question, but the issue is always before the court. Can they delve into policy, or is this a pure question of law? And it was a question of interpretation of Section 123 of the Representation of the People's Act. Now the court, and there one was dealing with a situation where in the election manifesto, the party was offering free colour TVs. In what name? Education and recreation, particularly for women in rural areas. Now, that was very beautifully packaged, but many people would feel that was most definitely an incentive to colour TVs to any household that didn't have it. Now, the court held that that would not amount to a corrupt practice under section 123, because a corrupt practice also is of a particular candidate, and this was imbibed in the manifesto of the party. So I'd like to ask your views on that judgment, and you're very free to criticize a judgment. That's not an issue. So what are your views on that?
Thank you for that question. I think one of the most important things that the court highlighted in that judgment, and that we would also believe in as per our stance, is that the standard of living and the way people's needs are presented are going to change over the course of times. Of course, it can be argued and said that televisions are not important for day-to-day life. But I believe that it can also be argued, which is what the court in the end held, that gadgets and televisions and laptops, all of these in fact actually are very important in today's times. The thing that the way we approach when we discredit the fact that televisions can be offered as incentives is that we have this idea and this sort of assumption that when freebies are being offered to marginalized communities, they should be deserving of it. That if they do not have access to a school, then they should not have access to a laptop. But the argument is that it's not either or. In today's times, it is both. So if you are going to a school, and this has been subsequently brought down where there are multiple schemes where laptops are, I believe it was Tamil Nadu, where laptops are being offered to students after a certain age. It's that while there is already a gap in the infrastructure where people's social needs are not met, it is important that the government is able to provide to them in some way. So I believe that the judgment realizing that at certain level we have a negative connotation towards how we view freebies is very important, because then it takes us to the larger picture of how welfare is not just limited to certain very obvious things like healthcare or sanitation. It goes beyond that. Thank you.
Yeah. I just feel like, I mean, I agree with what she said, of course. I think that also it's important when we talk about freebies, and this is for the entire discussion at large, because we're looking at it from a very big picture point of view. But unfortunately or fortunately, every good material or otherwise given out to people has context with respect to that state. Today, if laptops were given out during the COVID pandemic, it is because of an essential need of the people, not just the general digital divide, but of the people itself. In Tamil Nadu, and TVs were given at that point in time, and this is in no way to justify that. But I just would like to say that there was a cultural context to it. The politicians then were also actors, and in general, they believed that there was a very celebrity-like image that these politicians had. So that was given out in that sense. If they gave it out for that sense, it was also assumed, whether it's true or not, that people will use it to then, especially women, like ma'am said, to watch the news and be a part of the political rallies and discussions which they otherwise could not be a part of, because they are bound to their homes and they have to do household chores, etc. Again, this is a rural area or a remote part of Tamil Nadu that we're talking about. So it's very important to contextualize each and every item, and we can't just say freebies are is a bad concept, because every item that is given out or every service that is provided has context to it, and we need to understand the deeper context of that. And that is why we say that it is an elitist construct to say freebies, and it is essentially welfare measures at the end.
Okay, again to divide, just a very short question to both teams, answer it fast. We know that they give out liquor and biryani before elections. Is that justified? One after the other.
No, it's not justified. I mean, the crux of it is not justified because they're trying to swing the vote in their favor by offering something that they know the people probably might swing their vote for.
Yeah, I mean, again, that is something that has happened, and we have to again remember, and this is why we chose to particularly start off by saying that we would like to distance ourselves on this discussion at least from promises or poll promises, because a lot of promises are made which are not constitutionally valid, and essentially when they make a promise, they don't need to. There are a lot of differences between poll promises and state welfare. And that is an important distinction because poll promises, the very nature of it could be anything, right? Today I can, as a politician, promise anything. And this is a true fact. In Tamil Nadu, someone offered people a trip to the moon. And this has actually happened. So people have offered everything. Now whether Tamil Nadu is a state, no, they did not get elected. That's a good point. Someone offered a mini helicopter, someone has offered a robot. And this is just to show, and this is again, we are not justifying all of this and we do not stand for it because it is illogical, it is unreasonable and even implausible, like when we talk about the moon trip to the moon. And that is why it's important to differentiate not between welfare measures and freebies, but between poll promises and welfare measures, because anything can be promised before elections during a rally and they will never mention it again. There's a likelihood that they never mention it again. There's a likelihood that they try to bring it up, but it does not get approved in the legislative parliament, or the legislative assembly of that state or even central government, because essentially any state welfare measure has to come through the government. There is a process for sanctioning it. There is a budgetary allocation that needs to be made. It's not as simple as me offering biryani and then it's getting approved, right? I have to justify it. Today now we can argue about things like TVs which were approved, but they like I said, they had their own reasons. But something like biryani and liquor would not. So
That point is made.
Yeah.
Okay, then now both sides agree that some welfare has to be done and some welfare is not acceptable. What we call freebies or SOPs or electoral deals are not acceptable, whatever word we may use for it. Therefore this was, Socrates had said that I will debate with you but you define your terms. So we have to define our terms. So to both teams again, where do you draw the line?
Okay, I think we can take this debate at an equitable ground where we don't talk about extreme examples on either end. Let's take an example of where a political party is trying to come into power. It has given a scheme in its manifesto which talks about giving any kind of a so-called freebie that we're agreeing on, maybe an unemployment benefit. And it also talks about addressing a systemic issue. Probably like decreasing poverty. They don't have a provision for it or they don't have a specific scheme for it, but it's there in their manifesto. Let's look at it in the context of an election. The problem here is the marketability of a freebie. There's going to be a lot more traction to the unemployment benefit than solving the issue of just general poverty. What does this look like? They'll probably mention that they're going to give X income in every other rally that they go to. And this is going to be like the game changer for them because they know that's the clincher for gaining votes. We don't have a problem with this point even then. Why does it then get worse? The moment they come into power, given that they've come into power because of this clincher, this is more likely to get satisfied first. So it will always take the first hand and the tougher issues will always stay behind. And that's where I think political parties are now trying to grab the lowest hanging fruit. As in saying that, hey, if this freebie, because it's palatable to the audience, or because that's trending right now, if I choose that, that'll help me win the election. And after that, we can probably think to solve other issues.
Where do you draw the line?
I think the way in drawing the line here, and first, is it okay if I address what Rajdeep just said?
Of course, certainly. That is the reason.
Okay. I think the idea of saying that parties are prioritizing whatever freebies they have offered when coming into power is actually a sign of a healthy democracy, you would argue. Because if people are placing democratic pressure on these parties to say that, hey, we actually need laptops or we need sewing machines for women, it means that they are highlighting that this is something that lacks. And if the party is then coming into power and giving them these goods, I don't see why there's a problem with that. Because one, we have all already agreed that there is a degree of welfare in what is being provided. Now the impact of each and every welfare, as Isha said, can be argued. But the fact that they have come into power, they are providing something, there is a degree to welfare, and we believe that there is no issue with that. Another thing that I think I would like to point out is that even these parties need a prerogative to offer these needs in the first place. So if parties are going ahead and offering these freebies, it's because they also realize that this is a gap in society, and that if A party offers it, it's very, very likely that B party will also offer it. At this point, voters are being offered goods by both parties. So in fact, they are engaging in democracy to a greater level where they're able to exercise their agency and say that, okay, A party is also offering money, B party is also offering money. I get to decide which one I want to align with, because at the end of the day, I'm getting stuff out of both. Lastly, to answer where we draw the line, I think we draw the line at what is constitutionally valid to provide under the RB Act, and anything that has even the slightest impact is okay. Thank you.
So friends, now we'll open it up to the floor and the audience, and if anybody would like to address questions or comments to either of the teams. Yeah, would you like to this? Yeah, this.
So the debate about drawing a line. So there's a welfare scheme with a purpose to address a certain issue get converted into a freebie due to problem of implementation. Like there's a short-term goal, there's a long-term goal of solving the problem. But to address the problem in the short term, we require the welfare scheme of distribution of the goods. And does it become a freebie when the implementation problem comes and it is given to people who don't need it at that point? Something like your Rajiv Awas Yojana. If there is a house that is being given in a particular village to a particular person, and if they already have the need, they don't have the need, but they still show it, and it is accommodated by people that don't need the house as of now and consumed by them, does that render the freebie, does that render the welfare scheme into a freebie at that point? Is that the line we are trying to draw in the debate as of now?
Are you addressing this to both teams? Or
Yeah, anybody can ask.
Okay. Would you like to?
That is, I think, a question of corruption. Okay? So that may take the debate elsewhere. We are living in an ideal society, not corruption. We are debating there right now. Okay? Where everybody is going to make promises and try and keep them at least. So that is the premise. It's a flawed premise, no doubt, in the reality, but that is the premise.
Are you raising an issue of certain criterion, financial eligibility criteria? Are you raising the criteria or the corruption in implementation of the criteria?
I am talking about having qualifications or implementation of the schemes rather than removing all kinds of welfare schemes. Classification of the welfare schemes so that they don't become free.
You're saying that there's a need for eligibility criteria on the basis of income, etc.
Is that something that is a middle ground between both the propositions, the rejecting both?
Okay. Do you want to say something on that? Yeah.
Is essentially the same as Sir said. It is a matter of corruption, And that basically means that like states obviously have certain limitations, but like states are improving, governments are improving, but there is a capacity problem, and that we have to acknowledge, and we do. And basically now this only means that the implementation needs to be strengthened, and therefore monitoring, evaluation, ensuring that people get that. So again, we are not drawing the line there, at least here, because we think that you need to have, understand and admit that welfare measures are necessary at large, which includes freebies, and then therefore you can work towards strengthening them and bettering the system. Like every other system introduced or processed, like GST for example, it doesn't start out perfect, right? You have to work on it, improve it, and better it. Today if Nareka has problems, if Ayushman Bharat has problems, it's a separate conversation because it needs to be improved, but that does not mean that the need for it is understood.
Question. Yeah.
Sorry, and just to add to that, I believe that welfare schemes at large already incorporate a certain freebie element to them. And to show an example, the very popular Anganwadi scheme, which provides for nutrition to women and children, other than the fact that it is institutionally providing hospitals and nutrition centers, it is also going a step further and providing money to pregnant and lactating women. So there is a classification already where if you are somebody who needs an access to the institution, you can go there. But if you are also somebody who needs resources, then you can also avail them.
Actually, this is a point that raises another issue of how welfare schemes can sometimes be, for example, Anganwadi workers have felt that they've been exploited for years and underpaid, and they've been having demonstrations, marches, even strikes at times because the women who work there feel that they've been grossly underpaid. So that is another aspect of welfare funds, but that's a slightly different debate. Okay, next question.
There was somebody there. No, he had asked for you in the white.
इसके बाद पूछता हूँ. I will ask after.
Okay, afterwards then.
I think freebies is a investment. Is a long-term investment. Example, we give education to children. They have no money. Children's no money. Their parents invest on him. If we invest on education, free education. Can I ask in? Can I talk in Marathi or Hindi?
बोला मराठी.
मराठीतून बोलतो सर. जर आपण लहान लेकरांना बाबा शिक्षण दिलं.
1 minute, can you all understand?
हाँ ठीक है चलेगा. जर आपण जब क्या बोलते हैं?
Okay, I translate. Quickly, we have time. मराठी बोला. Okay.
जैसे हम बच्चों को फ्री एजुकेशन देंगे तो वो पढ़ेगा, वो अच्छे से पढ़ेगा. लेकिन हम वो फ्री एजुकेशन नहीं है तो क्या करना पड़ेगा? एक तो बहुत सारे बच्चे हैं कि वो एजुकेशन ही नहीं ले सकते. एग्जाम्पल SC ST OBC और बहुत सारे हैं गरीब, पुअर, ब्राह्मण्स और अदर्स जो हो गए वो भी नहीं ले सकते हैं. और आजकल जो है वो क्या हो रहा है? हाँ, एजुकेशन बहुत महंगा हो रहा है और इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं हो रहा है और इसके वजह से उनका एज बढ़ता जा रहा है बच्चों का और वो पढ़ ही नहीं पा रहे हैं बच्चे. और इस वजह से वो हमारे देश का डेवलपमेंट कैसे करेंगे? और ये बच्चों का और जो हम अब आप लोग हैं, हाँ, जो बूढ़े वो 60 प्लस 70 प्लस उनको भी एक पेंशन चाहिए 5,000 10,000 रुपीज़ मंथली. वो क्या होगा कि अगर हम हमारे जो ओल्ड है उनको एक बाबा ये रह जाएगा कि ब्रेन में क्लियर रहेगी तो हमारा कुछ नहीं हुआ तो हमारा जो बुढ़ापा है वो अच्छे से गुजरेगा. हमारी जो गवर्नमेंट है उससे हमें संभालेगी. तो क्या होगा? वो जो अपनी जवानी में है वो कुछ करप्शन नहीं करेगा, कुछ नहीं करेगा वो, क्योंकि उसके पास सेफ्टी है. हमारे यहाँ क्या होता है? हमें कमाना है. हमें जब हम बूढ़े होंगे उसके लिए हम बहुत सारा.
आपका सवाल क्या है?
हमें कहना चाहता हूँ
नहीं, मैं सीरियसली पूछ रहा हूँ. पॉइंट सीरियस है.
हाँ, is freebies. I am saying freebies is a investment.
हाँ, वो पॉइंट समझ गया. बराबर है. और कोई? Anybody? If there are 2-3 questions, then we can put it up. Yes, go ahead.
There are 90. 1% people who can understand more. There are 90% people who can understand more.
That's party, so that politician saying it, saying that program through the government. There's no point getting as whatever the no, they should not be able to say, let's say promise. They will see that follow. That's my view.
Very well. Yeah? Loudly, so people behind will be able to hear.
Opposition talks about how short-term benefits are not enough. I think the question that we should ask is this short-term benefit, even if in case of farmer loan relief, even if it just saves the life of one farmer, is it not enough? Like, is that not in and of itself a good?
I request everyone to settle down quickly.
Please, everyone, let's settle down.
What are the classification for means education, or education food, housing, and all other necessities are freebies, or beyond that?
Okay, your point is made. I'm asking for all the points because we are running late, and if everybody gives their points, then we can have one or two answers and we can then work. Conclude.
Karthik, please take.
I want to come back to the line here because it seems that there is some inconsistency between both the speakers of the opposition side, because the first speaker came ahead and said, gave the example of laptops, televisions, etc. And the second speaker very specifically said free ration, free lunches. So it's one thing to give examples for the line. Can you draw a conceptual framework, for the line? And this is about the policy line. What about the legal line? Because should there be a legal basis to differentiate freebies and welfare, and one should be allowed and one should not be allowed? Isn't that the prerogative of the government? Should the content of a policy be up for debate in the legal sense?
Thank you.
John.
Madam.
The House talked about how the freebies or welfare schemes are for the benefit of the community or people in general. And let's take the example of the Mahatma Gandhi National Youth Employment Policy. That scheme has been going on for years. And over the period of time, there has been an increasing need to receive more money in this. Then doesn't that actually highlight the deploring condition of the people? Then shouldn't the government take another approach instead of the welfare of people to improve the condition of the people?
Jonna.
Yeah.
How do you prevent dependency on the side view? And how do you, on the House rate, give effect to the institutionalized change that you're talking about without giving people the head start to be able to afford?
My question is to the red team. So you went ahead and characterized the term freebies really broadly, wherein you also brought under the cycle welfare scheme that the other team talked about. So if you just want to bring in institutional changes without providing the short-term relief or addressing the problem at the moment, for the poor people who can't even afford the basic necessities, do you think they'd be able to wait for that long for the long-term institutional changes to come?
Quickly now, and we'll close the last four speakers. After that, we close the list because, yeah.
Hi, actually I have a question for the side. So when we talk about freebies have some sort of an impact towards at the economic repercussion that the state has to take. For example, it was pointed out by the side opposite. And even if you look at the post-COVID era, when certain countries provided maps, like when we talk about Western countries, they provided a lot of free stuff to the citizens, and that eventually was one of the driving factors as to why they faced an economic crisis post the COVID era. how would you how would you really counter that argument where like freebies are eventually they're not as effective because eventually that just has to be the appropriation of going into debt and yeah.
I think one last question. Let's say that one more woman, please.
So my question basically is, yeah, freebies do create an impact definitely, but how do they replicate the long-term systematic changes that they do come in?
So I think now would either team should we
maybe close the list now?
Yes. The last one. The last one, please. Last one. मेरा तो हुआ ही नहीं.
Say your discretion.
My discretion.
Okay, one more. As you press very effectively.
My question is the red team, and it would take little time. Am I allowed? So my question.
Make it a little brief because we're running out of time.
मैंने रिसेंटली एक पोल किया था अपने व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप पे मेरा जो बैच है, and I put a question that what according to you is the most important turnaround for the future, for a better future, and 6 people including me voted for poverty elimination, 0 people sadly for energy transition, 4 people for empowerment of women, 4 people for food reform, and the most important is 19 people voted for reducing inequality. And when it comes to inequality, I want to put some perspective that today 10% people hold more than 75% of the wealth, which also includes 99% of the resources. And the bottom 50% hold just 1% of the natural resources, and they hold just 22% of the wealth. So my question is, अगर मेरा क्वेश्चन आपसे जो है रेड टीम से कि आपने प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण अन्न योजना जो बात की है, मेरा ये पर्सनल पॉइंट है कि इट इट्स शॉर्ट टर्म स्टिमुलस व्हिच प्रमोट द इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी एज वेल, सो हाउ डू यू से कि इट इज नॉट अनसस्टेनेबल. दूसरा क्वेश्चन था कि आपने शायद बोला था मैम, गवर्नमेंट डोंट हैव द इनफाइनाइट रिसोर्सेज फॉर द पुअर, but government had the infinite resources to the rich people to give them subsidies when they to the big corporate and all. So ये मेरा सवाल.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think shall we, friends, can you give us, everybody be a little patient, it's coming towards the end, I know everybody's getting tired. I think now we've had a lot of questions, so maybe if we give each team 5 minutes to you respond to whichever you feel are the main issues that have been taken up that you would like to respond to. So we'll start with the proposals. Yeah, sure. Will you time? Yeah. Because it's 5 minutes per team, so you could, one person would take 5 minutes or 2.5 minutes.
Okay, so I would like to answer the question on dependency, and the way I would want to answer it is that you are looking at something that is inherently welfare oriented through a capitalist lens. You are saying that people deserve welfare, but only if they are able to show that somehow they will not need this welfare in the future, which is not fair, one. And two is that this sort of idea that people will grow dependent is based on a very harmful assumption. As was this sort of assumption we also saw in Rajdeep's first speech, where basically it is assumed that people who need this welfare do not have ambitions of their own, do not have lives of their own. If they are given 3,000 rupees a month, they will just take it and move forward with their life. But that is not the truth. These are actual real people, and it is unfair to put this burden that they will become dependent on them. It is an actual need that is being highlighted. So if the PMJK has been elongated because throughout, like even after the pandemic, to provide free food grains, it is not because people don't want to buy food grains. It is because people don't have the money to buy food grains, which just highlights that this is not a dependency culture, it is a needs-based culture.
So I'll start with the point on states' finances. I think Rajdeep also mentioned that, and we got a question about it. For that, I would like to say, and I have the figures for it. Basically, there is, and we all must understand, an overwhelming responsibility on the shoulders of states when it comes to welfare measures. the central government, and even they have admitted it themselves, do not spend enough on welfare measures in comparison to states. Now, on social services, which include health and education, expenditure incurred by the center was up to like 2,230 billion, and all states together had spent almost 20,000 billion on just social measures, social welfare measures, and that is like almost 8 times more perhaps in social services alone. And now, when it comes to thinking about, okay, like, the states are spending so much, there's debt that's being incurred, let me remind you that borrowing is not a problem. Borrowing is something that every economy does, be it the United States, which we all claim to be huge, which also has a lot of debt on it. So now, as per the 15th Finance Commission report, the permissible limit of fiscal deficit for every state government was pegged to be 3% of its GDP, at the state level, GSDP, during 23 to 24. States like Odisha, Telangana, Jharkhand and Delhi, despite having higher subsidies or freebies, recorded fiscal deficits that were very low, which is 0.39%, 3.88%, etc. On the other hand, which is, and let me remind you, that is of course below the ceiling that was set by the Finance Commission. Now there are also states like Kerala and Rajasthan, and Kerala people want to quote about this, that they have a very, very high fiscal deficit and they do not have enough freebies to support it. So the direct correlation between fiscal deficit or loan or borrowing and social welfare measures is not actually proven, because there are a lot of other things that states borrow for, including infrastructure, etc. So we have to remember that. Today, Maharashtra government has spent 17,840 crores on the Atal Setu bridge, which connects Navi Mumbai to South Bombay. And on the other hand, which is, for, let me remind you, just limited to the city of Bombay. On the other hand, Karnataka's government has come up with the Shakti scheme, which is a scheme that they came up with, which is free rides for bus rides for women, and that has a total of 5,000 crores, limited to again the entire state.
Finish the sentence.
Yeah, so there is, and Shakti scheme also has other benefits, etc., which is pollution, public transportation, mobility, etc. So the point being that states do borrow for many purposes, and therefore finances is definitely not a concern when you actually look at the numbers.
Okay, opposing to you. You have 5 minutes.
Give me a bell at 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for all your questions, and I have noted them all down, and I hope that I can answer them as well through this time. We understand that the problem that is coming across is that what exactly do we mean when we talk about freebies? Essentially, anything and everything that people can themselves go out and get, which is not essential for them. If that is being provided by the state, that will qualify as a freebie. So, after taking this hardline stance, I want to talk about a question that was posed to us, that is it not enough to save even one farmer's life? Of course it is. But the question is, why have they been pushed to the brink that the question comes to taking their own lives? It's because of lack of ability to have an infrastructure in place which ensures that they are properly, they have proper resources, they have access to proper education in terms of farming, in terms of having their needs met. That is what we're talking about, not the fact that their lives need to be saved or something of that sort. That is not what we are arguing today. In terms of giving institutionalized help to people, here's the issue, right? You give them laptops, you give them freebies, but to what extent? What happens once? Do you provide them with an ecosystem to be able to use that to the full effect? Are you providing them with free internet in that case? Are you providing them with free support system in case that laptop goes bad, or in case that TV goes bad? You're essentially providing them with a white elephant that imposes more financial burden on them than taking it off. The issue here, and the key issue here, is that the state needs to provide an infrastructure which enables people to earn more, to be able to support themselves more without taking care of the state at all points of time. This is how, and this is exactly how you will resolve your concentration of wealth issue as well, by ensuring that providing them laptops and providing them TVs is not going to lead to an incremental increase in income as much as long-term benefits, as much as long-term schemes are, such as providing them with better education that can actually show effect, providing jobs, opening up the economy to new sectors, and ensuring that that the people are skilled enough to be employed in those jobs. That's what we need to tackle. And going a step further, and if we are to argue this, if you look at the amount of schemes that are being given, there's still not enough poverty alleviation, there's still not you still don't see a large amount of women being educated or being in the job sector, right? This means that these schemes have not actually achieved what they have set out to achieve, and this is after more than 70 years of such schemes being in place. So what we really need to look at is how, through long-term measures, we can provide for a better future, and not look at ensuring that the short-term measures are met.
Just to add on to Drasti, I think a few people here had questions regarding short-term benefits existing on this side of the house. I do think short-term benefits do exist. It's not like we do not want to solve the problem. If there is a government who thinks that right now probably giving certain kind of a payment would solve, in addition to obviously taking systemic measures, is something which can exist. But what is the problem right now? Look at how freebie schemes are contextualized in how they're sold. I think right now at an election or even in the manifesto, there's no mention about what is the total amount that is going to be spent. It's something which is only calculated later by independent agencies. They are silent about what's the duration of such a freebie scheme. They're silent about the comparative analysis of what another scheme would look like. That is where the question comes that do we obviously go for the easiest solution when it's the responsibility of the government to make those tough decisions because they know for the long term this is going to be a better option. So it is a mix of providing short-term benefits. This can be done in tranches. This can be done on a need-based implementation system. But at the same time, you also need to understand that there are certain facts which need to be disclosed for freebies, which is something which is not done right now. Second, and I think this question has been there throughout the debate of how do we distinguish between freebies, and I think that's a very tough question. If we knew the answer, we wouldn't have spent this evening here. But I do think it's not the best solution to probably take a legal perspective and let the courts decide, because that may be amounting to judicial overreach, given that this is the work of the executive. What's the second solution over here? Is probably you let the parliament take its decision on this, where probably both sides of the parliament go ahead and talk about or have a discussion of what they consider to be freebies and welfare mechanisms. I think that's something which you could probably have like a periodical list. That's something which can exist. It's something we have thought about. But more important over here is to understand the principle. If you're marketing something and just selling its benefits, it's probably not all free. There are costs attached to it. And that's something which voters need to understand. And I think on their side, you'll probably be undermining the voter by thinking maybe they don't understand this. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So now it is time for the most exciting part of the event, the final vote of the House. So everyone who supports this side proposition, consisting of Ms. Isha and Ms. Yashasvi, please select and raise the blue card. I request the members of the magazine committee to collect the same. Are there any votes pending for the blue house? Any votes pending for the blue house? So now everyone who supports the side opposition, consisting of Ms. Drasti and Mr. Rajdeep, please select and raise the red card. As we collect and count the votes, I request Jain ma'am to give her concluding remarks.
Friends, I'll be brief. I know everybody's tired. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to. This is the first time I've been to Government Law College. I hope it's not the last. We have a very close relationship as a chamber. We have a very close relationship with your college. Two of our main leading juniors at the moment are from Government Law College and famous interns. Some of our best interns have come from Government Law College, including, I think, we have the 90 here today. So we have a very close relationship with your college, and very much hope to continue that. That's number one. Number two, I've been really impressed today by both speakers. And I must say that as a young lawyer, I used to feel I want to run into court, get my order in 1 minute, and run out again before the judge changes his mind or her mind. And my father used to say, I love it when the judges are against me. I love it because it's a challenge. And I have to say that both teams took that challenge very well. And I must say that I don't know what the result is, but I know that the proposers got a much, much higher percentage of the vote when they started than they started with. So they took that challenge really well. So I congratulate them on that, but I congratulate both teams. I feel not just the teams, but even the questions. The questions were very, very insightful. Some were questions, some were more statements, but they were very, very insightful. And I feel that all of that together has raised some of the crucial issues. Now, what we were debating today was not just a legal debate. This is something which is striding, it's striding politics, it's striding legal issues, it's striding economics. And it's a very, very hot potato. As somebody raised the issue that, for example, in certain economies, like in UK now, it's become a big issue because they paid 80%. In them, COVID was the most unusual pandemic. Something happens every 100 years, so it was an unprecedented issue. They paid 80% furlough to people, 80% of what they were earning prior to COVID. And many people feel that that is an issue that impacted the economy in a big way. So these issues, whether in a country like India, where we have such a huge section of the population facing a very crisis on the very basic issues of nutrition, never mind health and education, it's a major issue. It's also becoming an issue in richer countries because where we see a global recession, always the two issues will come. Number one, pressure on the economy, and therefore on the budget. Number two, everybody at that stage needing welfare much more. So this is an issue that is being faced by various sorts of economies and political situations throughout the world. So it's a very big hot potato. I really feel it's been dealt with really well. Not just saying it. I feel it's been dealt with really well, and it's been thought-provoking for me. And so I thank you for that. And now are we ready with the votes? We're ready? I think we're ready to reveal the votes. So here's the big moment we've been waiting for. Of the way he introduced. The red team, which is the opposers, got 78 votes. I don't think it could have been much closer. I hope nobody asked for a recount. The blue team, the proposers, 81. Like that, so well done to both.
I request one Chaudhary to come up on the stage and everyone to settle down, I would like to introduce a new concept that we have introduced, this knockout. We have provided both the teams with researchers from our college itself. It's a boon to both the parties here, because the teams here get a helping hand and the juniors get certain mentorship about how to go about with research and drafting certain propositions, etc. So now I would like to call upon Rushil to the stage, and I would request the moderators to felicitate Rushil. Further, I would request the moderators to felicitate the winners, being the proposition team. I would further like to request one Chaudhary to come up on the stage. I request the moderators to present a token of our appreciation to Vansh. Further, I would request Sir to present a token of our appreciation to Team Red. I must say it was a close call, and I believe that everyone enjoyed the enthralling debate. As we come to the end of Knockout 2023-24, I, on behalf of the Magazine Committee of Government Law College, would like to thank a number of people without whom we would have been unable to organize this event. First, to our moderators, Mr. Singhvi and Ms. Cox, for graciously taking out time from their tedious schedule to come and spend the evening with us today. Thank you, Sir and Ma'am. Knockout is popularized by its speakers. I would like to thank each one of you, 4 speakers, who took out time to be present here today. Thank you for your fierce and engaging arguments. Further, we owe much of our ability to organize Knockout 2023-24 to our principal, Dr. Asmita Vaidya, and our professor in charge, Dr. Duffel, and further our constant well-wishers being Professor Peetawala and Professor Daswan. Further, I would also like to thank our copy editors for helping us make Knockout 2023-24 an intellectual reality. I, on behalf of the entire core of the magazine committee, would like to give my concluding thanks to our audience for being both patient and participative in today's event. Lastly, a word of gratitude to our past editors, being Anushka, Ray, Sanika, Rahi, and Sukhanti. Take care and see you all very soon.